All right, it's time to wrap this up with the 10th and final cut of the overall video, Mass Effect 3, A Failure at Storytelling, The Response, by Diaz Station, formerly known as Zaid Magenta. And please hit the like button and subscribe and help my channel grow because I am desperately trying to grow. I'm like a seedling or a sprout of a tree that is struggling to grow, but unfortunately I just so happen to be growing under the shadow of, well, I'm in the middle of a giant forest. I cannot grow because there's no sunlight. You folks are my sunlight. Please and thank you. Hit the like button. All right, let's see. He starts off with this weird Captain America meme of some kind. With, I do believe that's Casey Hudson, but I could be wrong.
Hi, I'm Captain America. Here to talk to you about one of the most valuable traits a soldier or student can have. Patience. Sometimes patience is the key to victory. Sometimes it leads to very little, and it seems like it's not worth it. And you wonder why you waited so long for something so disappointing.
You know that really cheesy movie or TV show you saw in the 90s when you were young and impressionable and thought it was the coolest thing ever, but then decades later you look back on it with an adult mind and realize how stupid everything about it was? That's Mass Effect 3.
Unfortunately, yes, I admit there are some works that are like that, but others still age like good wine, and it's just the bad sequels. Looking at you, Avatar: The Last Airbender, you were a masterpiece show that I admit I wish it was longer. I wish it was longer. I wish it was 30 chapters per book instead of only 20, and I wish the characters were 5 to 10 years older, because that's the one flaw. Kids, as much as I would identify with a kid back when I was their age, unfortunately I can't really see them fighting, adults. The whole damn story centers around a war. I want to see adults in the war, not the kids.
I mean it. I didn't even show
And sorry about that little interruption there.
and didn't realize how stupid everything about it was. That's Mass Effect 3. I mean it. I didn't even show you half of the nonsensical bullshit that this game had. The story is rushed in so many areas, with more plot holes and continuity errors than you can shake a singularity at. A lot of the dialogue is so cringe-inducing, with so many unbearable and convoluted lines that just go beyond the realm of ridiculous.
Yep, absolutely. I do believe I've said this before, but it's worth mentioning again. Mass Effect 1 and 2, especially the first game, went the extra mile to make me feel like I and Commander Shepard were one and the same. He only said something stupid if I allowed it, but Mass Effect 3 is full of auto dialogue where, that makes him come off like an idiot. I can't identify with idiots.
So many of the characters are wasted, underutilized, stupid, mishandled, contradictory, with motivations that make zero sense and artificially characterized to serve this nuclear wasteland of a plot. The world building is completely backwards, committing so many atrocious retcons that make the world of Mass Effect less interesting. The villains are complete and utter morons, who diminish their intimidation factors on backwards logic and self-destructive goals. And in spite of the developers constantly telling us that we have the ability to make all sorts of different choices, the path of the narrative is painfully linear.
And I'm not sure if this qualifies or not, but weapon customization is also badly limited in the third game, and all the more reason why I hated it. For example, notice over here the Avenger rifle. The first two games, it had a built-in scope, and thankfully Andromeda, to its credit, restored that. Mass Effect 3, you had to install the scope yourself, and it was, it stuck out like a sore thumb on the top over here instead of being embedded in the gun like it was supposed to be. The only problem with it in the first two games is that you weren't technically looking down any scope. So, combat was better in the third game, but too many limits. It was stupid. Instead of packing 5 or 6 attachments to your gun, you can only pack 2.
Telling us that we have the ability to make all sorts of different choices, the path of the narrative is painfully linear. The abundance of dialogue options we had in previous games are completely stripped away, with the wheel being thoroughly neutered. And what really bothers me about the abandoned squad mates we cared about getting sidelined is that they could have easily fit the slots of the new squad mates that no one even bothers to remember. Zaid, Kasumi, Jax, Samara, even Jacob had more personality and established character than James Vega.
Absolutely. First off, James Vega, yeah, like the other two token characters, Steve and Samantha, they feel really shoved in your face because BioWare is desperately trying to compensate them for the fact that they only appear in the final third of a trilogy. I never liked characters who were, crunched into the final third of a trilogy because, it felt like they were hogging space. Space that could be, used instead to wrap up veteran characters that we love. And yeah, I can think of, man, I'm having a hard time breathing today. Heartburn, Powerade. I love Powerade, but unfortunately it gives me heartburn. Anyway, yeah, there are several characters from Mass Effect 2 who have literally nothing else to do, and therefore there is no reason for them to not be part of the squad in the third game. Like Zaid, all he does is hang out in the Citadel, and same thing with Grunt. Why the hell should I take Grunt to a frickin' hospital? He's a Krogan, and a young one at that. He should be able to regenerate his health and heal in no time. Let's just house him in our med bay and give that part of the ship some use. Put him in the med bay, feed him a bunch of burgers and plenty of milk, and he'll be up on his feet in no time, and he'll be part of our squad. Unfortunately, we got to rely on a mod to do that, and unfortunately the mod cannot give him dialogue of any kind. It would be nice to have Grunt, as well as the fact that it would also change the cutscenes. Like when Liara gets thrown at our squad mate in the temple on Thessia, Grunt would not be knocked over like everyone else is.
And even then, most of your squad mates are just recycled from Mass Effect 1.
I'm not sure about that. 1, 2, and 3. 3 versus 4. Actually, no, Liara. sorry. Veyron, if you're watching this, I'm so sorry. I forgot about Liara. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, okay. Yeah, you're right. 4 against 3.
With less diversity and options available to you than Mass Effect 1 and 2, the story has a lot of interesting scenarios, but many of them are cheapened, rushed, badly written, or completely abandoned.
Oh, and by the way, there are brown-nosers who support BioWare's idiotic decisions, who insist that Mass Effect 2 had way too many squad mates. I beg to differ. First off, I believe in the more the merrier. And second, there's always the possibility, and of course people like to pretend this doesn't happen, there's always the possibility that we will not like who we are initially put with. So we would like to have the choice to pick somebody else. I don't like being forced to walk around with people I don't like, including in role-playing games. Mass Effect 1 allowed us to treat people the way we wanted to treat them. You can treat Ashley, for example, like a lover or a friend, or keep it professional, or you can treat her like absolute trash if you choose to. But now, in the name of political correctness, our ability to be mean to characters, if it qualifies as mean at all, it's completely removed. You have to be nice to them. Like Andromeda, I didn't like half of the people on my ship in Andromeda. If I could, I would have eliminated them.
With less diversity and options available to you than Mass Effect 1 and 2, the story has a lot of interesting scenarios, but many of them are cheapened, rushed, badly written, or completely abandoned. And I feel like what hurts most about this whole thing is that it didn't have to be this way. There was no reason that BioWare couldn't put out a better story than what they went with here. It's like a completely different team of writers with no knowledge of the first two games took over, and instead of thinking about how to put the narrative together in a way that made sense, they just threw whatever random bunker stuff came to their heads at the wall to see what would stick.
I don't know if he knew this and he was just being sarcastic right there, or if it was a wonderfully accurate coincidence. But yes, that's exactly what BioWare did. They got a completely different team of writers to write the third game, which is why there is such a disconnect.
Of writers with no knowledge of the first two games took over. And I feel like what hurts most about this whole thing is that it didn't have to be this way. There was no reason that BioWare couldn't put out a better story than what they went with here. It's like a completely different team of writers with no knowledge of the first two games took over, and instead of thinking about how to put the narrative together in a way that made sense, they just threw whatever random bunker stuff came to their heads at the wall to see what would stick. Even the ending ends up being meaningless in the grand scheme of things, if that even makes sense. The game has 3 different endings where you choose what Shepard's final decision is, with an additional choice provided by the extended cut. But since the trailer for Mass Effect...
And speaking of lacking choices, yeah, you either pick cooperate with Starchild or outright reject with Starchild. Why is there no middle option for me to say, okay, fine, I'm going to do this, but I absolutely hate having to do it, and I absolutely hate you for not, understanding or appreciating how much I hate you.
Makes sense. The game has 3 different endings where you choose what Shepard's final decision is, with an additional choice provided by the extended cut. But since the trailer for Mass Effect 4 confirmed the Destroy ending to be canon, it's going to make your playthrough even more obsolete if you chose one of the other endings.
I'll be honest with you all, I would rather see Mass Effect die than see Mass Effect be ruined any further than it already has with any further sequels. Mass Effect 3 was terrible, and Mass Effect Andromeda was a million times worse. I can't imagine what atrocious PC lecturing rainbow-colored mess the 4th or 5th game is going to be. I call it the 4th game because I don't recognize Andromeda, but a lot of people call it the 5th game.
Maybe it was the hype at the time, but I have no idea why it took me this long to realize what a legendarily awful piece of trash this story is. And it's really, really sad. Because in spite of everything I've said throughout this video, I still have a soft spot for this game. I get why people like it. I really, really do. It's not like there was absolutely no good writing that was put into it. There were actually moments in the game that kept me interested and made me care about these situations. There were times that the characters were well written, or you had an interesting down-to-earth conversation with them. There were times where the dramatic moments were effective or strong enough to make a certain scene interesting. There were side missions that were actually fun to play through with worthwhile dialogue and character interaction. I don't want to say Mass Effect 3 did nothing right, because that's clearly not true.
I unfortunately have to admit that is a good point, and I love the way you convey that. It's sad because it's true, and it's true that it's sad. I'm not sure. I need sleep. Oh man, but yeah, whether you like it or not, we got to take the good with the bad, and the bad with the good. But unfortunately. And that unfortunately means that if we have to throw away a game, we're also throwing away the bad bits and pieces. I always like to say, if I had a bunch of money and a time machine, I'd go back in time and fix these problems. And yeah, that's what I would do. Like, even Andromeda had parts that I really enjoyed. I would take the game, take out the bits and pieces that I loved, and integrate them with the original trilogy and discard the rest. Like, I would take the new alien races and the robots because, hey, the Milky Way is still a big place. But I would throw away the incredibly generic story and the terrible characters, or at least certain ones. Like, I would keep Vetra. Vetra and Suvi, of course I'd make her bi. Vetra and Suvi and Cora and Peebee. I would take those, and Drac. I'll take Drac as well. But Liam, Giles, the stupid Solarian, yeah, I throw all that away. Burn it all.
There were moments of good writing.
And same thing with, Legend of Korra. I would take the few bits and pieces, like, I would take Korra, but she would not be the Avatar. She'd be this random, generic, hot waterbender girl. Nothing more. Someone for Sokka to get in bed with, but nothing else. I would incinerate the very memory of the sequel.
And character development that was possible to make out through the cracks. In the beginning of the video when I said Mass Effect 3 had some of the best moments out of any of the 3 games, I really mean it. Things like Javik's character arc, Jack rising above her abuse and trauma and seeing her become a better person, Morden's sacrifice, Grunt's heroic stand against the corrupted Rachni, those conversations you had with Thane on the Citadel before his fight with Kai Lang, Grunt's heroic stand against the...
When this happened, I wanted to hug the screen. My eyes were wet. I was so happy to see my baby boy alive. And when he wanted something to eat, I just wanted to desperately cook him a burger. A nice big fat juicy burger, topped with cheese and toasted bread with butter and mayonnaise. Oh, my baby boy. I love you.
Character arc, Jack rising
And Jack, my dear love, I want to stroke that cheek. The designers did a superb job giving her the prettiest face of all the girls.
above her abuse and trauma and seeing her become a better person, Morden's sacrifice, Grunt's heroic stand against the corrupted Rachni, those conversations you had with Thane on the Citadel before his fight with Kai Lang, that final conversation with his son before passing away, your conversations with Ernat Bakara, that bro moment with Rex passing down stories about Shepard meaning hero, all those one-on-one chats with Liara, Garrus, and Tally, the fun banter between squad mates on the Normandy, all those nods and references to side quests and side characters from the first 2 games, that final conversation with Anderson, this is all proof that Mass Effect 3 could have been one of the greatest third entries in a video game trilogy ever made if they just put more time into thinking this story through. But with all the crazy just shit flying around in this completely broken narrative, it's impossible to ignore the smell. I guess what I'm trying to say is that the most disappointing thing about Mass Effect 3 isn't the story, the characters, or even the ending. The most disappointing thing about Mass Effect 3 is its unrealized potential to be a masterpiece. I really want to believe that if EA just didn't force BioWare to complete the game on a strict deadline and if it was given that extra year of development, then the story could have been a lot more satisfying. But in all these interviews I've seen, BioWare just seems way too prideful of the final product, in a way that they think the rushed end result that they put out was acceptable.
Mass Effect 3 should have been split into 2 games. To do the story justice, the Reaper War would have to have been in 2 games rather than crunched into 1, let alone only half of one, because we've got to remember, Cerberus, for no good reason, hijacks more than half of the whole game.
A lot of the conflicts are not properly set up or explained very well, and the numerous ways that the script was cut during production just makes the overall product feel less complete. The presentation of events and the order in which they happen is really sloppy, and the tone is constantly shifting in all sorts of terrible directions. Several of the themes are unengaging with how they're handled by the writers, and many of the characters are so inconsistent that they feel like completely different characters. It's not like the people who worked on Mass Effect 3 are incapable of telling a good story.
Like I said before, that's a consequence of new writers.
Who worked on of terrible directions. Several of the themes are unengaging with how they're handled by the writers, and many of the characters are so inconsistent that they feel like completely different characters. It's not like the people who worked on Mass Effect 3 are incapable of telling a good story. We saw in Mass Effect 1 and even 2 that they can put out some engaging and compelling writing, which makes you wonder even more what was going on in their heads when they came up with all these ridiculous ideas. These were incredibly easy to avoid mistakes that I cannot believe they actually made. It's so embarrassing that this game doesn't even feel like it's from the same franchise as the first 2. We already had good storytelling in Mass Effect 1 and 2, so let's make Mass Effect 3 a mindless action game. That is the logic that this game operates on. It's far from one of the worst experiences I've ever had. Believe me, I've seen far worse. But I just can't think of another game that brought far worse.
Oh yeah, well, I don't get the problem. I don't have a problem with muscular women just as long as it doesn't come at the cost of their more feminine parts. Like some women work out way too much and it melts the fat off their breasts, because breasts are made of fat. And so you don't melt off too much of your fat because you kind of need that.
Worse, but I just can't think of another game that brought more widespread disappointment to its fanbase than this one. It dropped the ball so badly that it made me feel indifferent towards the future of the franchise. I know there's Mass Effect 4 coming up and it looks like it's going to try and give us actual closure for the story of Commander Shepard, but given BioWare's the future of the franchise 1 and 2, so let's make Mass Effect 3 a mindless action game.
Sorry about that, but I need to rehear some things, and you probably need to as well.
That is the logic that this game operates on. It's far from one of the worst experiences I've ever had. Believe me, I've seen far worse. But I just can't think of another game that brought more widespread disappointment to its fanbase than this one. It dropped the ball so badly that it made me feel indifferent towards the future of the franchise.
That right there is absolutely based, because it's true. Mass Effect 3, when I first played it, more than a decade ago, 13 years ago, it left a real sour taste in my mouth. I felt like I lost something very endearing to me, and that feeling of loss was already being felt long before I ever got to the ending. The fact that Shepard felt like a hijacked character I was no longer feeling like he was mine, like he was no longer me. I felt like I was playing somebody else's character, and that somebody else programmed this guy to be an idiot, an unlikable idiot. Just no, and yeah, like I said before, I'd rather see the franchise die than be any further ruined any further.
I know there's Mass Effect 4 coming up, and it looks like it's going to try and give us actual closure for the story of Commander Shepard, but
And I absolutely demand he be brought back. Seriously, he was cheated out of a good ending. I do not want to play another character, especially if that character is going to be anything like Ryder. Mass Effect, I mean, male Shepard felt like he was a man's man, a guy with lots of testosterone in his system, and he was a man that commanded respect. Whereas Scott Ryder felt like a boy who drank estrogen laced coffee and spent way too much time hanging out with the baristas, talking about stupid shit, and reading Cosmopolitan magazine. Seriously, I hated playing him.
us actual closure for the story of Commander Shepard, but given BioWare's reputation in recent years, let alone their current status, I have very little hope that this will give us the closure we're looking for. It's honestly really sad that this ended up happening to Mass Effect. 10 years ago, it was at the top of the world, one of the most celebrated video game franchises ever made. Now it's just another third-person shooter. It didn't even have to be the best entry in the series, just a satisfying one. But Mass Effect 3, as it is simply not a satisfying conclusion, and this trilogy deserved a lot better. Its rich world, compelling characters, interesting history, groundbreaking role-playing mechanics, it feels like it was leading up to something so much bigger, but it feels like it just amounted to nothing in the end. And that's disrespectful for all the time we put into this trilogy, and it's also disrespectful for a franchise that could have been so much more.
That, despite your harshness at times, you brought a tear to my eye with the passion of that argument. And that, dear folks, was the end of it all. Although, I really do hope he makes another video, and Ripsort, sorry about that. I really do hope he makes another video about Mass Effect overall, because this, despite over 2 hours long, he still feels like he's only touching the tip of the iceberg of everything that is wrong with Mass Effect. But he definitely he sounded emotionally drained after that. Oh, and by the way, Diaz, if you're watching this, what happened to your MAP, your original Patreon page? I mean, I noticed your profile's still there, but it says that you don't have any patrons anymore. So, how do you close a patron without closing a patron? Just curious about how the mechanism works. And why did you completely throw it away and start a new one? I'm just curious. I'm just curious. Yep. And recently, a friend of mine bought me the game for $6, and so, or maybe I bought myself the game, or maybe my friend bought me something else. I don't remember. Oh man, I'm talking like a podcaster. But then again, this is an unscripted response. Anyway, I've just got to pick up the courage to play it again. Play Mass Effect again, although I don't think I'll be able to play the original graphics anymore. They just look so primitive and obsolete by default, and plus they have fewer mod options. Anyway, I will link to you an uncut version and of both the cut as well as the full video. And yeah, you can watch them if you don't like to hear my sound of my voice. But please hit the like button on those videos as well. I need to grow. Thank you so much and for your help so far. Have a good night.